So I got involved with the raging Twitter troll a few days ago, and it was an interesting experience because I'm used to people saying off the wall things just to get a reaction out of me, and for that reason I usually just steer completely clear of trolls altogether. However, the reason this one dragged me in is because it started as what I thought was a harmless conversation about the state of parity in the NBA. Once I found out that account wasn't interested in having a regular conversation with anyone who had a different opinion than it, I just kinda left it alone, but it did leave me thinking, because what I got from that conversation is that you're batshit crazy if you think that there was ever a point in time in the NBA where there was any sort of parity in it, which is a weird concept to me for two reasons. The first being that I became a super fan of the NBA just about 10 years ago, and this is the first season I ever felt that there was just zero parity in the league whatsoever. But it's also weird because I see everywhere that Kevin Durant ruined the parity in the NBA with his move to the Golden State Warriors, which runs contrary to the idea that the league has never had any at all. Even more surprising to me is that I found a good number of people who believe the league never had parity. This caused me to do a lot of thinking about NBA history as it pertains to that concept, and today I want to present to you all the truth behind parity in the league before Kevin Durant. What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and I gotta tell you, I enjoy being an unbiased fan because I simply don't care enough about certain narratives to argue them to death if I can see someone else's point. It saves me a lot of unnecessary wasted time. The parity argument particularly falls under this category because after I got done thinking and reviewing what I needed for this idea, I saw some pretty strong points for both sides. First off, it's extremely easy at face value to argue that the NBA has never really had parity. Consider this: between the Bulls, Celtics, Lakers, and Spurs, these franchises own 44 of the 70 NBA Finals trophies that have been handed out. That's 4 franchises out of the 30 we have today that own over half of NBA championship history. And what makes that look worse is that you can pretty easily break down how it all happened. The 50s and 60s almost exclusively belonged to the Celtics and Lakers, but mostly the Celtics, who won 11 championships under Bill Russell. Nobody cared about the NBA in the 70s as it was undergoing a rampant cocaine problem, but the Celtics and Lakers still managed to make multiple finals, with Boston picking up 2 more. We all know about the miracle of the 80s where Larry and Magic were drafted to save a failing league, and here either the Celtics, Lakers, or both would be in the NBA Finals for the entire decade. And after that finally died down, Jordan's Bulls would completely own 6 years of the 90s, which led right back into another Lakers dynasty with Shaq and Kobe. The Spurs picked up 1 title before that and sporadically won 5 championships between 1999 and 2014, leaving us where we are now, where the Warriors seem extremely likely to be the NBA's next dynasty. So people who support the Warriors are asking, what's the problem? NBA history has statistically been owned by 4 NBA franchises, meaning there's never been parity. Why are people all of a sudden mad that it's the Warriors? Well, to answer that, I guess we should define parity first. Parity is defined as a state or condition of being equal, especially regarding status of pay. The key words there being equal in status. Now, let me draw a line here. I'm not going to be arguing that there was any kind of parity in the 50s or 60s because there wasn't. There was only a few teams in the league, all the best players played for Boston or LA, so obviously that was probably the worst state the league has ever been in, which is understandable because it was still a new thing back then. There's no reason for me to talk about the 70s because again, the NBA was all but failing and a random assortment of teams were popping up in the finals. The 80s, however, is a hotbed. It's hard to argue parity here when you consider that either the Celtics or Lakers were in each final series that decade, but I think there's a few stark differences between that and today. Remember that parity has to do with being equal in status. Well, that's just it. Boston and Los Angeles were seen as equals, and that's part of why their era got so many people interested in the first place. Larry and Magic were seen as fierce rivals, leading their teams to the finals, and while the majority of the time they could handle any other team in the finals, those two locking horns was a brutal match where no one really knew what the results were going to be. So while you knew the Celtics or Lakers would be in the finals every year, the 3 times they saw each other, there was not a definite answer to who was going to win when it started. Take that and compare it to what we have today. As far as most people are concerned, the Warriors simply do not have an equal in this league. With the addition of Kevin Durant, the expected outcome is that we're going to see the Warriors and Cavs in the finals for a few more years, the difference here being that the Warriors really resemble an all-star team, and while Cleveland has talent of their own, it's clear at the moment that they're a few tiers below these guys. The worst part about that is while the Cavs are just barely competitive with the Warriors, they're still light years ahead of anybody in the East. So basically what we've got is a situation where neither team has a true threat in their conference, but the finals are still lopsided. This is pretty different than in the 80s where while the West was the easier conference back then, the Celtics had some brutal battles getting through the East before an amazing series with the Lakers. But let's talk more about what parity actually is to us. I know it has a textbook definition, but from my understanding and the way NBA fans use it, parity doesn't mean that there's no dominant teams in the league and there's just a lot of equality everywhere. It means that there are dominant teams, however those dominant teams have legitimate challengers somewhere out there. And this is why I say 2017 is the first year I've personally experienced with just no parity at all, because I've been able to say that since the day Durant signed to Golden State, they had no legitimate challenges anywhere. Of course there's the Spurs, but I don't think any of you seriously believe they were going to beat them 4 times, but we'll come back to the present in a minute. My point with the 80s was that you had the Celtics and Pistons battling each other, the Celtics and Sixers, who actually created the best playoff series of all time, the Lakers lost some finals to the Sixers and Pistons, and most of all, the Celtics and Lakers were vulnerable to each other, which is something we're not experiencing right now with the 2 heavyweights. In Jordan's 6 titles with the Bulls, those weren't 6 playoff runs like the Warriors are having right now, where it just seemed like nobody stood a chance. The Bulls had legitimate challenges in the league where they were almost beaten by the Pacers and Knicks that both went to Game 7s, and only one of their 6 finals lasted less than 6 games, whereas the series we're watching now has serious potential to be a sweep. Just because the Bulls were never beaten doesn't mean there was no parity in the league at the time. Those weren't just boring seasons where there was an easy foregone conclusion. There were teams out there that had a real chance to knock them off. Of course, in hindsight, we can look back at it and say they won 6 championships, so there was no parity, but I can guarantee you those seasons were probably not like this year where you could call the outcome of the finals with 100% accuracy. And I suggest you refresh your memory by going back to the year 1998 and looking how they even got to the finals. They came dangerously close to being knocked off by the Pacers. But let's talk about the more recent years, because those are the ones I remember the best, and 2010 is a great place to start. So 8 years ago, the 2009-2010 season was underway. Boston was coming back after being bounced by the Magic in the second round because Kevin Durant got hurt. The Cavaliers added Shaq, which looks laughable now, but at the time, the Cavaliers were actually routinely favorites to go to the finals and win it if you can wrap your mind around that. The Magic were looking to take another step with the addition of Vince Carter after being handled in 5 games by the Lakers the previous year, and of course the Lakers were prepping their title defense led by the ridiculous will of Kobe Bryant. 2010 is my most cherished memory as a basketball fan so far, because although the Celtics ended up losing to LA in 7, I find it hard to argue that season wasn't full of suspense and parity. First off, the teams I named, Celtics, Lakers, Magic, and Cavaliers, were all being looked at as teams that could not only go to the finals, but realistically win the whole thing. As the year played out, the Mavericks added Caron Butler, and they looked like a serious contender, and the Suns would actually end up taking the Lakers to a 6th game, which almost resulted in a 7-game series. On the East side, Boston ended up upsetting, yes I said upsetting, the Cavaliers as a 4th seed. At the time, the majority of people were saying Boston was too old and washed to do anything, meanwhile LeBron was really starting to look scary. Boston started that series on the road, they started the next series in Orlando on the road, and managed to beat both of those squads with a chance to become only the 2nd 4th seed ever to win the NBA championship. Of course it didn't happen, but once again, the Celtics and Lakers looked like equals in that series, which made it very exciting to watch. And truth be told, even though LeBron James joined 2 top 10 players in their primes, the Miami years were still entertaining even when they seemed like they shouldn't have been. Think about it. Sure, they went to the finals 4 times, and the East has been a pretty boring place ever since then, but they only won 2 of those finals, and most people would agree they were a split second away from being 1-3. I would agree that the East has really had zero parity since LeBron has taken control of his career, because I never personally thought he had a real chance of losing the East after 2011, but to me the NBA as a whole hasn't been completely void of parity until this year, where the Warriors are just in a different tier than everybody else. So did KD ruin the parity in the NBA by himself? Was it LeBron and KD? Or did the NBA have any parity at all to begin with? In all honesty, it really just depends on how you look at it. If you choose the perspective of looking at NBA history in a black and white perspective, then there was never any parity because the top 1% owns half the league's history. If you look at how in most of the normal years, even the league's greatest teams had a few legit challengers that could dethrone them, and sometimes they did, then maybe it does look like Kevin Durant ruined it all, because now the Warriors sit on a throne pretty much by their lonesome. But what if you choose to look at LeBron's move and the impact it's had on the league? In all fairness, there's been 3 bold-faced attempts at a super team since LeBron made his move: the Lakers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Warriors. If you consider LeBron's second stint in Cleveland a super team, then there's actually been 4, but that's a conversation for another day. Of course, only the Warriors have been successful as a super team since LeBron's, but the Lakers and Nets were a direct challenge to LeBron's Heat's team of the time, and Kevin Durant's move to Golden State is truly only a better version of what LeBron did. We can play semantics all day about who went where after they lost to who, but when you just take a team set up at face value, when LeBron went to Miami, there had never been a free agent move that joined 3 top 10 players all in their 20s. KD just took that a step further by joining 3 All-Stars on what could have been the best team ever, and hopefully it stops here, but from this perspective, it kind of looks like the lack of parity in the league has been a process that began at the start of this decade. But again, the answer to this question all depends on the perspective you choose to take. And regardless of whatever conclusion you draw up, this is just kind of our situation right now as NBA fans. NBA has no parity, and it really looks like this could go on for the next 3 years at minimum, so not looking good. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I shed some light on the situation about parity before Kevin Durant in the league. All I wanted to do was show that you could really argue for both sides, and I would love to know what you think, so make sure you leave your comment in the comment section below, hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, hit the bell next to my name if you want to be notified whenever I post a video. I'm Dom2K, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.